Hey everyone, welcome to my weekly wrap up. My cat is trying to play, which is why it sounds crazy. It has been an insane week, both in terms of just COVID exploding and in terms of the election and not knowing and thinking it looked one way and then having it turn. So yesterday my mom and I decided to go to this garden and sculpture park, and we just thought it would be a safe way to hang out, and I pulled into the parking lot, and right then is when I found out that Biden is president-elect. So it was an extra amazing time with my mom. We hadn't hung out for a few weeks because of my COVID scare, and it was just like such a great time with her, just like like celebrating and just like letting it go and enjoying time with her in the park. So I will include some clips.
You want me to do it for you?
Yeah.
Oh, Karen, I cannot wait. Don't turn.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's farm.
Yeah, true. True. This is my favorite sculpture. So even though Biden is president-elect, I'm still kind of a little bit nervous about how things are going to go between now and January, even possibly beyond that. And what I think is really, really important to talk about is that just because for most of us on BookTube, there's someone favorable to us in the White House, and I know that even people in different countries were thinking about this, it does not mean that we give up. We need to fight just as hard as we were fighting when somebody else was in the White House, as far as all the issues that we care about, whatever those are for you. Because what I've really realized is that you can't just like vote and then be done with it. There's a lot more. There's a lot of grassroots things and things that you need to do in your own life. And so personally, I will be continuing to work on like Black Lives Matter and improving my knowledge and my activism in that regard, and also the environment. So whatever your thing is, don't give up. Keep working just as hard as you did before. All right, and now on to books. This week, because it was a little stressful, was so crazy with books. I read so much. I have, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 books to talk about. So let's start with the first one. I did the Thousand Doors Readathon this week, and I'm not going to share my prompts because I don't want to spoil it for anyone who is still doing it or who would like to do it again and follow a different path. But anyway, the first book that I read was 5 Lives Remembered by Dolores Cannon. She essentially has passed away, but she used to be a hypnotist, and she would try and get people to go into their past life and just learn more about their past life. And what I really like about her books is I really enjoy, like, it's not necessarily that I take them for truth, but I enjoy hearing kind of what other people believe about like the afterlife and about why we're here, our purpose, and all that stuff. And so while I enjoyed this book, this really followed one person and her past lives, and there was really a very small section that was interesting to me, just as far as like why we're here and stuff like that. So this was not one of my favorite ones. It was her first book, and she could not get it published forever. She had a lot of other books that were published before this one, even though she wrote this one first. And she says straight from the beginning, like, this is the first person that we ever brought to a past life. And so I don't know that she's necessarily called herself ignorant, but she's like, this was like how she learned. And so she says that at the front, like, this was our first time. You might hear us talk in a kind of way that isn't like at the same level as our other books because we were still learning. So I think I gave this 4 stars. I liked it, but it just wasn't as good as another one that I read by her. The next book I read was The Sixth Extinction, An Unnatural History by Elizabeth Kolbert, and I wish I would have put tabs in here, but I did not. This book was good. I liked it, but it was a little all over the place. Like, it wasn't quite as linear as I was hoping it would be. It goes through chapters that are just like a bunch of animals. So it starts by talking about extinction. It talks about mastodons, penguins, ammonites, and then it kind of talks about like the ocean and the forest, and it talks about a pregnant rhino. I mean, it's just, to me, I didn't quite have it as connected as I wanted it to be, but I still really liked it. I really found it interesting. I really liked the first line of this book, which says, "Beginnings," it said, "are apt to be shadowy." And I love that so much. It was really sad to hear about the different animals that have passed away. Like, there's some horrible pictures of like a whole bunch of frogs that died and they're just on their backs with their bellies up. I thought it was really interesting, this one part, which talks about how the original birth control, or not birth control, sorry, pregnancy test was a frog. It was used in the 1950s and 60s. Basically, they like injected them with the urine of someone who thought they might be pregnant. And if the frogs laid eggs, then the woman knew she was pregnant, which I thought was super crazy. And I also thought it was cool. I guess I should have realized this with like Thomas Jefferson and going to his house before, his mansion, and just seeing like it, when you first walk in, all the natural sort of stuff that he found that he has sitting out on display. But it was talking about how fossil collecting was popular among the upper classes. And so yeah, it was kind of a sport for them. But yeah, this wasn't as much directly about extinctions as I thought it would be. It's more, I would say, about animals. It definitely is about extinctions, but just not. There's another book I read that was more what I was thinking it would be. Also, I thought this was really interesting. There's this little picture with 3 different size circles, and this is an illustration of what is called the Signor Lips effect, which is basically that all these animals could have died, but there are very few of these ones. So you might think that these ones are older because you find fewer of them. Like, if all the white circles are an animal, if you find fewer of them when you are looking for fossils, you might assume that they're older than everything else in this picture, when in fact there's just fewer of them to begin with, and so it's less likely that you'll find them. So that was pretty cool too. So it was good. Then this is definitely 5-star. This book is called Well Read Black Girl, and it's by Glory Edom. This book is like, if you love books about books, this is it. This is a bunch of influential Black women writing essays about how they came to love literature, and some of the books that were impactful to them and some of the books that allowed them to see themselves represented. And so Jesmyn Ward is in here, Tayari Jones, lots and lots of really cool people are in here. And so I just love this book because there were so many book references in it, And there are so many women that it was really interesting to hear more about their story. Then, this is a book I should have put tabs in. I did not. Strength to Love by MLK. This book made me want to read everything by him, and so there's another book coming that I really, really want to read. But this is just a book of sermons that he gave to his church, and it is just so much good information. As you can see, it's super, super tiny, but it took me about 2 days to read just because of like how slow I wanted to go, underlining everything, soaking it in, thinking about how it would impact my life. I will kind of go through some of the points in the first essay just because I forgot to put tabs in for the other ones. But his first sermon, I guess it's not an essay, his first sermon is about making sure that we are tough of heart and also, we must combine the toughness of the serpent and the softness of the dove, a tough mind and a tender heart. So we need to have a tough mind and our heart needs to be tender. And he just talks so much about our present situation, and obviously this was written so long ago. He says, rarely do we find men who will willingly engage in hard, solid thinking, and that needs to be brought back to our society. We need to be willing to evaluate fact and fiction and just be willing to think deeply about topics. He said, few people have the toughness of mind to judge critically and to discern the true from the false, the fact from the fiction. Does that sound familiar? And then he says that the soft-minded man always fears change, and that soft-mindedness can sometimes invade religion. This is why religion has rejected new truth with a dogmatic passion. So these are all things we kind of have to guard against and make sure that we are just really being critical consumers of information, I guess, and also seek out information on purpose. There is this conflict between science and religion, which has always been super interesting to me. And he said that it is not true that there should be no conflict between science and religion. Basically, that you can have both, that they both serve different purposes. And he talks about violence. Violence brings only temporary victories. Violence, by creating more social problems than it solves, never brings permanent peace. And he says, through nonviolent resistance, we shall be able to oppose the unjust system, at the same time love the perpetrators of the system. That is so hard. One of the things that's really important to me is I feel like there's this population of our country that feels that they are not heard, they're not seen, heard, loved, appreciated in any sort of way. They are looked down upon, and that's why they voted for Trump. And so for me, I want to figure out more about them and try and understand them, because I'll be honest, I don't understand them, and I get very frustrated with them. And so, you know, I do think it's important for our country to unite. And that does not mean giving up issues that we find important. Like, we cannot agree to disagree about race, for example, or other topics, but we do need to find some way to come together and to live in communities that are more diverse and all that sort of thing. And so I'm just curious, like, how that would look in my life to be able to understand that group of people better and to make them feel seen, heard, and loved. All right, so this book, The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warning by David Wallace Wells. This is what I was looking for when I read this one. This was much more linear and more organized, better put together, and there were so many facts in there that were so freaking scary. So, yeah, this book is terrifying and anxiety-provoking, so don't read it if you are not in that mood. But anyway, it starts with an intro, which basically says things are worse than we think by far. And there was an extinction 250 million years ago, while carbon dioxide warmed the planet by 5 degrees Celsius, and we are like so close to that right now. It said that right now we're adding carbon to the atmosphere, and the rate is 100 times faster than any point in human history before the beginning of industrialization. And like we're making all these plans to try and improve, and things are just getting worse and worse and worse. It said that the course that we are speeding so blithely along to more than 4 degrees of Celsius by the year 2100, which could possibly be in my lifetime, just depending on how long I live. That is so scary that we are going to be so close to that. And that we're like a single generation away. I mean, like, there are people on Earth that could be here when things start to go very, very bad, and they really already are. So what this book goes through after the introduction is it goes through all these things that would happen if our climate changes, and like we don't always think about all these things. So it talks about dying from heat, dying from hunger, drowning, wildfire, California, disasters that are not really natural, freshwater, dying oceans, unbreathable air, plagues of warming, economic collapse, climate conflict, and other things. It even talked about refugees and how many of them, the wars in their country were like caused by climate conflict, or at least it played some role in it. So yeah, like I wish I would have put tabs in here because there's so many like terrifying bits of information. But this book, it's so scary, it's so interesting, and I have so much underlined. This is a book that I'm definitely going to keep, reread, reference, and yeah. And as far as like individual decisions, it's made me think about some things that I can tweak to improve a little bit. But the main things to think about are not traveling as much, which I think most of us are not traveling very much right now. The other one was to have fewer children, which I'm good with that right now. And the other one is like a vegan diet, which I am following. So those are the biggest things that can have an impact. All right, then I read Addie on the Inside. I read the another book in this series. So this is about a group that calls themselves the Misfits, and there's a character named Joe who I already read and reviewed a book for, but Addie was my favorite character in that book, so I decided to read her story. And Joe's was an alpha biography, so he had a section for each letter, and then he talked about whatever he could think of that started with that letter, and Addie's is all in poetry. So I enjoyed this, but I definitely decided that while I thought that I loved Addie, I was really in love with her parents. Like, I just want to hang out with them so much. She wrote this poem about worrying that really I connected to, although I'm not like 12, so it's a little different. But she says, every morning I wake up worrying, and not about crushes or acne or whether I should stuff my bra so people will know I'm wearing one. I worry about global warming and polar bears dying and war and more and more and more. I worry about injustice and how to make the world a better place, because I contend that if you are not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. I worry about the rights of minorities, and I worry about all the people who love people and the people who hate them, don't want to love. I worry about my parents, and I worry about my friends, and I worry about people I don't even know who have lost their homes and their jobs and have nowhere to go. And I worry about what happens to all their pets, and I worry about the economy and national debt. I worry about the animals that are going extinct and the animals that are abused just so we can have a new scent of perfume or a new kind of shoes. So as you can tell from that poem, Addie is kind of a feminist and definitely an activist, and that's partially why she doesn't fit in with all these kids who are just living their life, not thinking about things bigger than them. And she also writes this other poem about how people tell her to tone it down all the time. That's definitely something that I can connect to because I'm always too much or too little of something. So annoying. Okay. Oh, I forgot to, I can't remember if I read this book before or after this one, but I finished the audiobook of The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Here's the thing about that. The beginning of it made me really upset because I felt like it was the same as The Discovery of Witches. Basically, this college student goes into a library and he finds this book that the library doesn't even know it has. He takes the book and all of a sudden he is being followed and crazy things start to happen. That is the exact same as The Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. However, after that, it becomes quite different. So, perhaps I shouldn't be so judgmental about the copying. I honestly didn't love the plot as much as I loved just being like soaking in this environment of books and cats. And like the atmosphere of the book was so cool and the word choices were so soothing. And I forgot what those videos are that people are watching on YouTube, like ASMR or something like that. People called this book like that for book lovers, basically. So I enjoyed it for the atmosphere and for all the sensory sort of things, but I only gave it 3 stars. And then finally, this was not my favorite book, The Hilarious World of Depression by John Moe. I definitely found his experience with depression interesting, and I marked a few places, but overall, I would rather read Jenny Lawson talk about mental illness than he did. He talked about just having so much trauma in his life and about how that kind of could have causes. Said, I never wanted to go all that deep into therapy because that's where the monsters were. I'm talking about the really, really bad memories, the deep bruises, the scars, the events that significantly shape a person through injury, trauma. Rather than tackle the past, I was willing to settle for a tense ceasefire with it, letting my life be like Middle East countries that hate each other. There would be car bombings, but a homeland is a homeland. So basically, this is his journey through mental illness and through all the traumatic things that happened to him throughout his life. He is a comedian, and it was supposed to be funny, but I didn't really laugh at all. Yeah, just read Jenny Lawson. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Trauma. Oh, he talks again about trauma, which I find really interesting. Trauma occurs when something blah. Let me restart. Trauma occurs when something happens that's too horrible for your brain to deal with, so you just store it away. Over time, the horrible thing, which is still there, starts coming out in a variety of ugly ways, causing mental problems that you don't even associate with the trauma because it happened so long ago. So again, like there's a few other places I marked in here and there were some good lines, but overall I was like, meh, and gave it 2 stars. So those are all the books that I read this week. Coming up, I'm hoping to read 2 fiction and 2 nonfiction books this week. Actually, one of them might take longer than a week. But basically, the top of my cart, I rearranged it so it's all fiction books. And I'm hoping to destroy the whole top of my cart and finish it by the end of the year. So we will see. I think it's around 15 books that I would have to read between now and the end of the year, and they're all fiction. So obviously it's nonfiction. November I'm trying to read mostly nonfiction, but we will see. I'm wondering how your week went. Like, I know that this is kind of like a US centric thought to think that people have been stressed out over the past week, but I've heard from other people in other countries that they had trouble sleeping this week. And honestly, sometimes I feel like they were more concerned than I was, which is crazy. Um, although I really was very worried about the election. But I'm curious, like, do you guys find comfort in reading during stressful times? Do you feel it's hard to concentrate on reading during stressful times? Or does it just depend on the situation and it's a mix of both? I don't know. I hope you guys have an amazing week ahead, and I will talk to you later. Bye.